The San Antonio Spurs have put out fillers on trading for Josh Giddey. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Plus, we're going to talk about why this trade deadline is very unlikely to save the Chicago Bulls despite all the rumors and everything is going around. We're going to do a trade primer for the Chicago Bulls, as well as look at Billy Donovan's win percentage and preview tonight's game. All that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host, Derek Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today, y'all. I want to start off with something that was tucked away in a Mark Stein report that not a lot of people have actually talked about, which I want to kind of break down here, and that was this. They said this. Another name that's always lingered as a potential franchise point guard of the Spurs interests Charlotte's LaMelo Ball. The Hornets have never welcomed the trade inquiries for their eccentric ball handler, and yet the Spurs sources have said they've tried to register their interest in Ball during previous transaction cycles. Chicago's Josh Giddey has likewise been a young guard the San Antonio Spurs have envisioned possibly pairing with Wemby down the road, but those trade conversations have neither gone very far. This is something that we like. Here's the thing, right? And I'm going to try to make sure that I separate this. I'm talking about an asset standpoint and not necessarily the player standpoint. I know that they're tied, right? But I want to be very clear here because my Josh Giddey fans, listen, I love you guys. You guys have been some of the biggest and most stout fans of the show since you guys became members of the Bulls fan base because Josh Giddey was traded here, right? So just know that in this conversation, I'm not knocking Josh Giddey at all. I'm talking about from an asset management standpoint, right? Josh Giddey is who he is, right? And I do think that when you look at it, the Chicago Bulls have not yet been able to create a team where you're able to maximize on what Josh Giddey does well, while also kind of limiting and controlling some of what he doesn't do well, right? They haven't done a good job at that roster building yet. And I've always said that the Bulls have to ask themselves a question in this next offseason when it comes to before they extend Josh Giddey or not. Do they feel like they have the runway, the time, and the assets, and also the interest to build the team in a way that you're going to be able to overcome some of the shortcomings of Josh Giddey, which means that you got to create more three-point shooting out there. You got to have players that like to get out and run. I think we got that building on the bench. You also have to have some really good switchable defenders out there that can help because Josh Giddey is not the best on-ball defender. He does give effort, right? I've said it before. Josh Giddey is absolutely a confidence player, though. When he's not really having success on the offensive side of the ball, there's times where he doesn't engage as much on the defensive side of the ball. But again, I hope that people are objectively able to look at that and say, no, Hayes has a point there, right? Not trying to kill the young man, just trying to be honest in what is going on, right? So, with all that said, is that if you have to make a decision on Josh Giddey this offseason. And so far through what we've seen, Kobe and Josh Giddey have not necessarily worked the best in the backcourt. It's not been the most seamless. Now, with that also said, you have to make a decision on Kobe White the following offseason. So at soon, unless and they're probably going to give it another year. There's been a small sample size. There were some signs that they were starting to figure it out. Which did mean, though, that the ball was going to come out of Josh Giddey's hands. So you're not going to see necessarily Josh Giddey always have the assist numbers that he had on the OKC Thunder because he's out there with Lonzo. He's out there with Ayo. He's out there with Kobe, other players that are going to need the ball in their hands to be their most effective. We talked about how Kobe White is not a jump three-point shooter. He's a player that likes to drive. He's a player that has to have the ball in his hands to get to the paint and the defense. That's how he creates. He creates open looks off of it. He creates shots for himself off of it, and he's pretty damn good at it when he's able to do that at a high rate, right? But doing that may mean, all right, what does Josh Giddey turn into off ball, which that hasn't necessarily been the best place to put Josh Giddey either, right? So you run into a situation where you're hoping that these young guys, still very young, Josh Giddey's 22 years old, that he can still figure it out. But because you have that pending question coming, and the San Antonio Spurs have the draft capital, you have looked now. Now, I was against Pat when Pat said, shout out to my co-host, Pat, the designer over on Locked On Bulls, when he was, very upset about the Bulls not taking the Clint Capella trade because he felt like you got to do something, right? This is a move where I'm saying this. This could be a move that comes back to bite you in your ass because Josh Giddey's trade value has dropped, not just because of Josh Giddey and the player he is. That's some of that part of that. You can't knock some of that, right? But also because the Bulls haven't put him in the best position. He hasn't looked the best. Storylines are a thing that happen and affect players' values as well. And that's something that is impacting Josh Giddey. Now, I don't know how far these talks have gotten. Maybe the Spurs weren't willing to come off one of their first-round picks. But I'll tell you what, if the Spurs are offering any type of young player to match salary and a first-round pick, which you should, I don't give a damn what the story of Josh Giddey. I don't give a shit that he was out of the play, that he was one of the reasons that he was unplayable in the Thunder's last. I don't give a shit about none of that. You can save all your typing if you're about to type on that because Josh Giddey's 22 years old. He's a player that since he's come in the league, he's been top 10 in overall triple doubles. So yes, he has flaws. Every player has flaws. But you're coming off one of those first round picks. But if a team like the Spurs are saying that this is the player that we envision being next to Wemby, that's a leverage that you have that you could take advantage of in trade talks because they're calling you. You're not calling them. And that is something that is very interesting to me. Now, again, it's not like Mark Stein was saying that, hey, they offer this amazing deal and the Bulls said, no, we good, right? And hopefully that the Bulls are ready to invest because if they're ready to invest in the type of players Josh Giddey needs, an athletic, rim-running, shot-blocking big would do so much wonders to help overcome for Josh Giddey and Kobe White a lot, especially on that defensive side of the ball, right? Much less in the offense, right? Lob threats, things like that. So if the Bulls are ready to go out and get that player, cool, right? Take everything that I'm saying in this segment, ball it up, throw it away. I'm trying to be objective in this. But if the Spurs called you and they said that they have 4 first-round picks, I'm not even saying just do it for the rights to your own pick back. You have a huge opportunity to keep that. But if they were willing to throw in one of those picks in this year's draft, that is in the 2025 draft, and you turn that down for a player that you're going to have to extend for big money and you have not yet invested enough in to get the most out of, I got to start questioning what the hell are you doing here? That's what I got to start questioning. That's my personal opinion. I'm not expecting everyone to share that opinion with me, but I'm looking at this team, reading the tea leaves, and I'm keep asking myself is, all right, so what is starting to be good enough? Now, I understand that you just acquired Josh Giddey. Maybe you see a very bright future of Josh Giddey in the Chicago Bulls uniform, and you are very adamant that you're going to do everything that it takes to make sure that you get the most out of that asset. That's what smart franchises do. That's why I said this isn't necessarily a knock on Josh Giddey. This is about assets. Well, everything that we've heard is that the Bulls want assets. And I have been sitting here saying I don't think Josh Giddey has that big of a trade market. But if the Spurs, a team like the Spurs that are up and coming, say that, no, this is a guy that we want to be next to Wemby, and you looked at that and said, nah, bro, we good? I got some questions on what the hell the goal of this front office is. The San Antonio Spurs right now are a team that are looking out. Again, with the De'Aaron Fox thing and De'Aaron Fox reportedly wanting to go there, you may have missed that opportunity. You may have missed that boat to do that. They're 2-8 in their last 10. And if De'Aaron Fox comes knocking, I'm sorry, but you ain't got nothing coming for Josh Giddey if De'Aaron Fox wants to go to the Spurs and the Spurs look at that and say, yeah, we about to acquire De'Aaron Fox. So it's just another question on what the Bulls front office, what their management goals are. And I guess we'll see and continue to talk about it. But you guys, as always, can let me know how you feel down below. Now, with that said, right, there have been a lot of talk around the Chicago Bulls and this trade deadline and what they could not, what the goal is, what they could acquire, all these type of things. And I feel like, especially now that we're like basically exactly a week until the trade deadline, we're under a week, it's next Thursday, to the trade deadline. What are the Bulls? What is the current state of the Bulls and the possibly trades on the market, right? I think that, listen, the Bulls apparently have 3 main trade chips that could be moved. Lonzo Ball, Nikola Vucevic, Zach LaVine. Now you have other filler that could be included in that in Torrey Craig and Taylor Horton-Tucker, and I'm including them because they're vet minimum deals, meaning that if you need, because the Bulls are so close up to well, all of our contracts are guaranteed, it means that if a team needs to send 2 players back to match the salary of Vooch or match the salary of Lonzo Ball, right? If they need to send 2 players back, you have a vet minimum contract. So that way, it doesn't mean that they have to match a whole hell of a lot more money than the main contract that they're trading for. So we're looking at the Bulls of having basically 5 main trade assets. Zach LaVine, Lonzo Ball, Nikola Vucevic, Torrey Craig, and THT. Those last two, those are fillers in a trade, right? And because the Bulls aren't necessarily looking to be buyers at the trade deadline, but we'll still talk about it, the only picks that the Bulls can trade right now, if they wanted to, is their 2030 pick. They can't trade this upcoming pick. They can't trade 2026. They can't trade 2027. They can't trade 2028. So that leaves the 2029 and the 2031 first round picks that they can include in any deals. But the Bulls, in the place that they're at, I hope that they're not looking at trades where they would have to include the first round picks. But again, we're going over assets. That's what they have. The Bulls also have a $17 million trade player exception, right? And we're also $9 million beneath the first tax apron, meaning that we can still acquire more money than we send out, up to $9 million, and still avoid the dreaded luxury tax because Papa Jerry Reinsdorf does not like spending into the luxury tax. So that's really what the Bulls are looking at, right? Now, they do have other players that if they want to get crazy, right? We've heard things that they've taken calls on just about everybody as far as Kobe, Io, Patrick Williams, right? So they could do something crazy and unexpected by including some of those guys to get even more assets back if they choose to do so at this trade deadline. But overall, when you judge and look at the value that these players have, right? And I think the thing is you have to understand the value that the Bulls hold versus the value that the open market may have for these guys. Vooch right now, $20 million this year, $21 million next year, 20 and 10 guy, starting to slide a little bit here over the last couple of games, but Vooch has been very consistent over his career. You're looking at him as basically an 18 and 10 guy for his whole entire career, right? So a team understands that they're getting a offensive big who can score in the low post, right? On post and dives, who can shoot some in the mid-range as well and can extend it out to the three-point line. You just don't want to make him a three-point shooter. You want to allow him to take three-pointers in the rhythm of the game, right? And so we've heard teams like the Mavericks. We've heard teams like the Golden State Warriors, right? We've heard that these teams could be interested in Nikola Vucevic leading into the trade deadline. Also recently the Atlanta Hawks, but again, I think that interest may have wavered some, but maybe with Jalen Johnson being out and the Atlanta Hawks not owning their own pick, that they are willing to maybe make a move now with some other salary cap filler to try to get it done. Maybe that may make them say, maybe we need to revisit those Vooch trades, right? Zach LaVine, everything's all over the place with Zach. We hear that the Warriors could be, some people within the Warriors want Zach LaVine here and other things like that. But overall, Zach's market is, we don't really know, right? For Lonzo, we've heard Detroit, we've heard Orlando, we've heard teams like the Lakers, right? The Clippers that are teams that could be interested in Lonzo Ball. And so the Bulls right now, when you're looking at what their goals are potentially heading into the trade deadline, and most likely it's assets, right? Assets, young players if they can get them, and salary cap filler, but no real money. It seems like, right? And I'm saying seems like because, again, it's not like we've overly heard this from the Bulls front office or any insider, but it seems like the Bulls have kind of zeroed in on they don't want deals that go past the 2026 season. That's what it seems like if you kind of put all the rumors together. They don't really want any money that goes past that. And the reason why is that if everything board right now, the Chicago Bulls are set to have $65 million in true cap space in 2027-28, the summer leading into that, right? So technically, I think the Bulls don't really, unless they're extending their own guys, don't want to cut into that, right? So they don't want to take any extra long-term money back, so that money would have to come off the books the 2026 season. That's what it seems like, right? And so if the Bulls can get, they have negative $24 million, but $121 million beneath the first tax apron in the summer of 2026. So if that's also what the Bulls are kind of looking at, engaging as, all right, this is our market, this is where we are. It also kind of, they're not looking for that long-term salary back. So the Bulls sit in a place where they're teetering between, they aren't really yet able to take on long-term bad money, which is going to limit the assets that they can come back unless it's just a bad contract that a team wants to get off the books that maybe so they can be players in next year, or they just want the Bulls players. So the Bulls have put kind of some limitations on themselves, which I'm not mad at. Every team has a goal, right? Of like, hey, we don't want to go past this state. That's fine, right? They also had value set for their players. First-round pick for Vooch, multiple first-round picks for Zach LaVine. We've heard multiple second-round pick compensation for Lonzo Ball, right? So that's kind of what they're getting at and trying to get it. And I'll say this. If the Bulls can walk away with trading Lonzo, Vooch, and Zach LaVine, and you can walk away with that with 3 or 4 first-round picks, protected or not, and 2 second-round picks, that's decent, right? It's not the amazing value, but again, when you look at the way that the Bulls have mismanaged value, you're not really going to find the most amazing value out there for your guys. But, and the Bulls sit in a place as well where with Vooch and Zach LaVine, they should be perfectly fine if they need to kick the tire down to the offseason to kind of determine what happens in the draft, because there are going to be some teams that maybe aren't happy with their draft status, maybe looking to add some more experienced veteran talent, are going to be willing to come off of something. And maybe that's where the Chicago Bulls sit as well. Maybe they're willing to wait to take advantage of that. I know the waiting for the fans is not necessarily the most exciting thing, because fans want it now, right? They want to know that their team picked a direction now, but some of that may have to come down the road, right? So, we'll see what ends up happening with it, man. Overall, it's still difficult, man. It's still difficult to really picture exactly where this team is going to be at. But hey, we shall see, right? When you look at the teams that right now are in the lottery, right? Teams like the Golden State Warriors, who would have a lottery pick right now, could in the offseason look to move that lottery pick. And maybe that is still for Vooch. Maybe that is still for Zach after they see, hey, this is where our season finished. This is how it finished. Maybe it puts them at a more apt place to be able to make a move for those teams. Teams like Orlando, which are right outside the lottery, maybe rather than pick outside the lottery, they want to take advantage and add another veteran or scoring presence. So the Bulls they're taking some calculated risk, but I think overall, we'll see where it's gonna go. But with that said, before we go, I do want to talk a little bit about Billy Donovan, right? And Billy Donovan has a 48% win percentage here with Chicago. He's 176 and 190 as far as his win percentage here with the Chicago Bulls. He has not won a lot of games, right? But he hasn't lost a lot either. And the question I think that a lot of people have to ask themselves is, what is Billy Donovan going to do for the future of this team? He has one more year left on his contract, right? And in the 4 full seasons so far, we don't know what the result's going to be this season. 1 playoff win, 2 play-in wins. And it doesn't look like the Bulls are going to get an opportunity to play in a playoff series this year either. So the thing is, right, in trying to really get this team in a direction, sometimes you have to change the captain who's leading that direction. That can apply to AK as well. So I want to be clear here. That phrase and terminology can apply to him as well. But I think until the Bulls are more willing to maybe move off of Billy Donovan and truly hold him accountable for some of his shortcomings as a head coach here, the ship can only be righted so much. Billy Donovan is a coach that if you give him a team full of superstars, he's going to do pretty damn good. Now, the problem is that if this Bulls team is going to go in that direction, you got a long time before your players are turning into stars. You're probably not going to get a player that's going to be a star day one. And so because of that, you're going to go through a development period. You got to ask yourself, coming out of that development period, is Billy Donovan the right guy, or have you instilled the right guys to be able to get yourself there? And I don't think that the Bulls have had yet. But, I mean, when it comes down to it as well, maybe I'm just running out of patience as a fan. Maybe the front office has more patience as a team, as a front office that has to build a full team. And to that, I give them a little bit of credit. But for me, this team has left a lot to be desired in what they're doing here. And I hope that they can correct it. But all right, the Bulls do face off tonight against the Toronto Raptors. And while the record should tell you that this should be a game where the Chicago Bulls should be able to come in and win, when you look at the last 5 games for the Toronto Raptors, on top of them being on a very long winning streak that has really kind of changed the perception of where their team could go, they're on a 5-game winning streak. And over those 5 games, the Toronto Raptors have the second best net rating in the game of basketball at 14.7. They are beating teams on average by 14.7. Now, here's the thing that when you look at it, though, you also have to look at the schedule. Who have they been facing over those last 5 games? They face the Orlando Magic, pretty solid team, but they're still trying to get some things together. 2 wins against the Atlanta Hawks. They've been struggling. They're on a bad losing streak. A game against the Pelicans and a game against the Washington Wizards. So it's not like you're looking at that and saying they've been facing off against the best. Now, here's the thing, though. They had 1 loss to Milwaukee, but before that loss to Milwaukee, they actually had 2 wins against Boston and Golden State. So it's some signs there that, hey, they can still punch some teams in their face if they catch you slipping. Now, they have a terrible offense, 21st offensive rating, even over their 5-game winning streak, but their defense, 98 defensive rating, which if that shaked out for a season, that would be one of the best defensive rating seasons by a team ever in NBA history. That's first in the league, right? 14th in true shooting percentage, even though they don't have a great offense, they're taking efficient shots. Second in assist percentage, 13th in rebounding. The second, though, in third in defensive rebounding. This is a team that right now is playing really good. Really, really well. They have one of the longest winning streaks in the NBA right now. That could be said about a lot of teams kind of easing off the gas a little bit leading into the trade deadline. But overall, the Toronto Raptors are a team that can catch the Bulls slipping. The Bulls got to be prepared in this one. And again, like I said with everything, they got to be ready to execute on both sides of the ball. If not, they're going to get punched in the face. And the Bulls team has not always reacted well to getting punched in the damn face. So let's hope that the Bulls are prepared tonight for the game. We'll be live tonight. There may not be a pregame show, but if there's not, halftime hangout, postgame shows, all live on the channel. So make sure you guys are tuned in for that. But other than that, make sure you guys are following us at Bulls Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullscentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the #1 spot for everything basketball related, but that's thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.